The anime started with Yogiri. He is a loser child walking in a corridor filled with corpses and bullets flying in all directions. He walks towards a camera and asks where Asaka is his caretaker. He continues walking towards a room and the door suddenly opens. A woman is wielding a gun as she holds Asaka hostage. Asaka asks the woman what she wants, but the woman tells her to shut up. Yogiri happily runs inside the room, happy to find Asaka. The woman tells Yogiri to not move, otherwise she will blast the Asaka's brains out. Asaka complains about being hurt, and in the next second something happens. Some waves appear and the woman drops dead to the floor. Asaka is confused, but Yogiri simply hugs her and smiles while saying they should return. Suddenly, an older Yogiri is awoken from his sleep by his classmate Tomochika, who seems to be in a panic. He opens his eyes asking who she is, but quickly remembers she's the girl with the weird name. He remembers that before taking a nap, they were on a class trip and asked if they already arrived. However, Tomochika replies they haven't and tells him to wake up and see what's going on. Yogiri looks around and sees several of his classmates lifelessly and they're full of sauce. He notices that one of them is pierced by something strange and asks what it is. He decides to look outside the bus and notices something wrapping around it. He thinks it could be a giant snake or a lizard. To figure it out, he grabs a random mic on the floor and throws it against the pier guy. Turns out the dead cannot fight you back, but the thing that pierced him starts moving. Yogiri returns its attention outside the bus again and realizes that thing is a huge wyvern. The monster flies up and decides to charge at the bus while preparing to breathe fire. Suddenly, Tomochika hugs him in despair. That moment rewires Yogiri's brain. The sensation of a plot-filled girl holding onto his arm changes his mind. He focuses his mind on opening a door and says one word, die. In the next second, the wyvern suddenly collapses onto the floor. Yogiri tells Tomochika that they're safe, but she's confused and asks about what's going on. Yogiri pulls out his console while telling her to calm down and tell him what happened. He started playing a video game, but she got mad mentioning this was not the time to play games. After watching him play for a bit, she simply tells him that he's trash and video games and starts giving him tips, but she quickly realizes about their situation and tells it's not the time. He asks if she's feeling better and she confirms. He tells her to start explaining how they got into this situation. Tomochika reveals their bus was driving casually through the night. However, after passing past the tunnel they found themselves in this strange field. Everyone was confused and she even asked her friend if the outside was always like that. However, her friend couldn't answer. Suddenly, a girl entered the bus and greeted everyone inside. She introduced herself as Shion, the granddaughter of the great sage. Their teacher got up to complain, but the girl simply popped his head right away. The girl then acted like nothing, telling the kids to calm down and pay attention without doing anything stupid. Everyone froze in shock, as the girl told them not to annoy her, otherwise, everyone would meet the same fate. She explains to them that her power level is 530,000. She then pops up the driver's head mentioning that was a joke and she expected them to laugh. She knows this isn't unfair, but that's how it works in a different world. She decides to then explain this whole thing to the students. She summoned everyone here because she's looking for sage candidates. She reveals this world is ruled by sages and their numbers are quite low. Therefore she summoned them as a way to get new personnel. She points out her hand forward while casting some magic. Tomochika thought everyone was going to get blasted and closed her eyes, but when she opened she saw several students glowing. However, she was one of the few who didn't glow. Shion then reveals she installed Battle Song version in all of the glowing students and they should see some logos on the screen. Tomochika is confused and asks her friend if she can see anything. Her friend uses her fingers to touch some air, explaining she sees some colorful letters saying status. Shion then reveals this system can only be used in this world and is called the gift, and everyone must use it to try and become sages within the next month. Tomochika raises her hand to ask a question. She claims that she didn't glow or see any of the logos. Shion simply replies that some people are not compatible and that she should deal with it. Tomochika gets shocked, especially when Shion reveals that if nobody becomes a sage, they will all become livestock to produce magical energy. Shion then explains their first mission will start in an hour and they should try to not get wiped out right away. She then walks away and Tomochika sits down, revealing that she doesn't understand anything. Her friend mentions there are some details regarding their mission on their screen. Turns out their job is to escape from the incoming dragon. Tomochika doesn't believe something like that exists. However, Yazaki, one of the guys, tries to act like a leader. He claims they should try to clear the mission and how they all need to work together, and for that reason they need to talk about their strengths and weakness. Everyone writes their name and stats on pieces of paper, but Tomochika realizes that there are 4 students including her, who didn't glow. However, one of them is Yogiri who's sleeping, cause who cares? They all complain about his carefree sleepy time until they notice everyone else stepping outside the bus. They also decide to go outside, but Tomochika stays behind to wake Yogiri up. The other girl tries to convince her to leave him behind, but they suddenly hear 2 guys arguing. Turns out Yazaki won't let the 4 come with them. The delinquent complains, but Yazaki tells him to shut up because his class is the general. He decides to turn into a douche, breaking the bus chairs, and explains that this is the power of a gift. He's only level 1, but he's way stronger than those 4 pleb humans. The other girl tells Yazaki that if he's strong, they should protect them. However, Yazaki replies this is part of the plan. Everyone is confused, and he tells the girl by his side to use his gift. She activates her charm ability, which doesn't affect anyone. Yazaki walks away, explaining the skill makes her popular with monsters. In short, there's a nearby dragon around, and by using that skill on them, the dragon will attack them while giving the rest a chance to escape, and this was a decision that everyone with gifts made. Tomochika cannot believe that her friend would betray her, but Yazaki reveals she actually did, but Tomochika knows that Yazaki must have forced her. Yazaki then steps outside and locks the door. They try to open it out for a while when they suddenly hear a noise outside. Tomochika thinks it's a dragon when suddenly something crashes against the bus. The guy freaks out and Tomochika notices the other taken out. After explaining the whole thing, Yogiri realizes there's a big problem. He has no way to recharge his console in this world. He then gets up, mentioning that according to Yazaki it's now safe outside. Tomochika asks if Yogiri did something, but he replies the dragon crashed onto the floor and died. She knows it's a lie, but they decide to get out through the window. Upon checking the surroundings, Yogiri notices they can go to the hills, city, or forest. Tomochika then points out that something is flying in the sky. After observing, she realizes it's 3 of their classmates. Yogiri is impressed by her sight at long range and asks if he should kill them. She asks what is wrong with his mind, but Yogiri simply replies they left them behind to die. Tomochika says he shouldn't talk about killing them. Yogiri's answer is that they could be hostile toward them. She's confused, but the guys start getting closer, also confused because the dragon is dead. One of them notices that Tomochika is still alive and complains that he was planning to turn her corpse into a zombie so that he could go wild. Yes, that type of wild. The guys talk between themselves, complaining about turning a corpse into a zombie and using her as weird. Hearing those words, Tomochika realizes they clearly cannot be friends. Suddenly, one of the guys casts a huge fireball that barely misses Tomochika. The guys keep talking between themselves how about they refine their magic and how one of them is a healer, the other a hero, and the last necromancer. The guy who cast the fireball then tells Tomochika to come to his side without resisting. She's confused about his request, but the 3 simply reveal they want to spend their fun time with her. Tomochika realizes they're all after her body. Yogiri is impressed that she has the guts to say that in that situation. The necromancer guy complains she and Yogiri seem too close, but Yogiri simply says he will manage even the conversation. He points at the fireball guy and tells him to die. The other 2 laugh it out, but get shocked to see the guy randomly hug the floor. They ask what happened and Yogiri replies he simply ordered him to die. He tells them to not move, but the necromancer tries to check on his friend. Yogiri tells him to die as well. Only Fatso remains and Yogiri says that if he moves, he will die. Yogiri promises to explain his ability and tells Fatso to check if the other 2 are truly dead. Fatso complies and uses his healing ability, mentioning he can cure anything in an instant. However, his friends don't move. Tomochika realizes that Yogiri is the one who killed the dragon, but he simply didn't want to explain what happened. She gets mad at those words, but Yogiri explains that Fatso is dumb, so he needs to explain in detail to him instead of her. Fatso complains the Yogiri went too far, but our boy simply explains he only did it because they tried to attack him. He then explains that his ability is called instant death to any target. In fact, he doesn't need to tell people to die, he just needs to think about it. Fatso says that's impossible, but Yogiri would love to test the theory. Fatso accepts the feed and tries to get close to Yogiri, pretending to be scared, but he's preparing to attack him with a magic attack. However, Yogiri simply tells him to stop. Fatso is confused and Yogiri explains that he also has an ability that allows him to know if someone has the intent to kill him or not, and to make it worse, he can combine the 2 abilities. In short, he doesn't need to know who's trying to kill him. Fatso gives up in tears and Yogiri asks why they're so cocky so early after getting those skills. Fatso then reveals this is the second time the three of them came to this world. They defeated the demon world and returned to their world. Yogiri asks Tomochika if the three missed any classes and she replies they didn't. Fatso reveals that when they returned home, only some hours had passed. Yogiri decides to kill him, but Fatso asks Tomochika to help him. Tomochika replies she is only alive because Yogiri saved her, therefore he should deal with it. Fatso calls her cold and pulls out an item, promising that if she puts it on him he will become her servant. In short, it's a slave collar and he puts it on himself. He acts like a pervert while walking toward her, but she tells him to stop. The collar starts strangling him and she asks if there's a way to stop being his master. Fatso obeys the order, mentioning that she can transfer it to another person. She does it, transferring to Yogiri, who decides to not kill him. Instead, Fatso should head to the forest full of monsters and wait there, but before leaving, Fatso should leave all his items and never tell anyone about the Yogiri and Tomochika. Fatso obeys orders and Tomochika asks if this is okay. Yogiri replies that Fatso will always betray them, therefore it's better this way. She then asks if he isn't suspicious that she might turn him in. Yogiri simply replies it is what it is, and after all he's the one who decided to protect her. She blushes, mentioning she doesn't know how to reply and that they never spoke much before. She asks why he decided to protect her. Yogiri initially replies he doesn't know why, but after Tomochika's insistence, he admits it was all because of her soft and juicy developed plot. She blushes and gets angry, complaining that men are all the same. Meanwhile, Shion is in bed doing whatever is that the guy comes to report, mentioning that the first mission was cleared with 4 casualties, 2 with no ability and 2 S ranks. He mentions the S ranks died instantly without warning and thinks it's an instant death magic. However, she returns the possibility and returns to bed. The story continues. We see Yogiri and Tomochika manage to reach the nearby city. Tomochika is happy about it, but Yogiri is feeling sleepy. They notice the guards closing on the gate and rush out to them. However, they cannot understand what the guards are saying. Still, they order them to wait until they call their lord. The lord appears and mentioning that this situation is annoying and asks if they got separated from the guys that came at noon. Tomochika gets happy as the guy can speak Japanese. However, Yogiri simply asks if the guy can let them in as they're trying to catch up with their colleagues. The guy gets annoyed, mentioning that usually people need to pay to get inside. However, he has orders to not get in the way of sage candidates. Yogiri then mentions his colleagues talking about heading to the capital and how they can get there. However, this ugly face simply tells that he won't get in their way or help them at all. Yogiri thanks him nevertheless and decides to leave. However, this trash-faced dude says that he wants Tomochika to spend the night in his house. She immediately rejects him and pulls Yogiri as she walks away. Upon getting inside the city, Yogiri asks why she ran. She replies that she was afraid that Yogiri was about to kill him. Yogiri gets confused and asks if she thinks he's a serial killer. However, she replies that she's surprised that he hasn't noticed that. Upon looking around, Tomochika gets excited because it looks like a fantasy city filled with beast folk. A fox girl named Mirio then approaches them asking if they are sage candidates. She asks if they are lost as it seems like it's their first time in the city. Tomochika gets hyped to see some cat ears, but Yogiri asks what she wants. The cat girl explains she wants to help them for free. The two get confused and ask why she would do that. Mirio explains she wants to get along with the sage candidate boys for 2 reasons. First, they have a guaranteed future, and second, they're easy to seduce. Tomochika thinks this girl has no salvation, but Mirio replies she doesn't want to seduce her boyfriend. She believes that the secret to building a great relationship comes from friendship. Tomochika explains they're not a couple, but Yogiri wants to know her opinion about their situation. She answers that she wants to look around the city before it gets dark since that's her goal. Yogiri asks Mirio to show them around. After Tomochika's shopping spree, she reveals that she never expected to wear this new type of clothes so casually. However, she's so blind that she doesn't notice that they're currently surrounded. Yogiri reveals that he was expecting to end up in this situation. Tomochika apologizes, mentioning that she wanted to follow Mirio because she looked kind. The bandits start their treats, but Yogiri protects the girl while asking if they want money. The bandits reveal they do want money, but their main goal is to get talentless sage candidates. He explains those who possess gifts usually go rampage in their city. Everyone hates them, but they cannot do anything to them. However, sage candidates who have no gifts are perfect to beat up and sell. Tomochika starts to freak out, but our Sigma Yogiri is still chilling. He replies that he understands the deal but asks permission to kill the bandits. The bandits mock, explaining they will be the ones who will be killing them. Tomochika tries to warn Miryu up, explaining that Yogiri is actually strong despite his looks. However, this stupid cat girl thinks this is all a bluff because two people without a sage gift are as useless as you in real life. Yet, Yogiri pulls his verbal death note and orders everyone behind him to die. In an instant everyone is down, the rest of the bandits get confused, but Yogiri continues his task, ordering the leopard dude to half die. However, the guy collapses and Yogiri realizes that it's impossible to be half dead. He decides to try something new and points at the KFC's ankle, ordering it to die. The guy collapses, but Yogiri thinks this was a mistake. He points at this bear dude's shoulder and orders it to die. The guy goes to the next world as well, and Tomochika says that Yogiri is so harsh. He reveals that he tried to go easy on them and orders this dog's eyeballs to die. The guy becomes blind, shocking everyone. Yogiri continues his onslaught, forcing Miryu to ask who he is. Yogiri doesn't reply, thinking that it's not efficient to kill individual body parts. Miryu tries to play the victim, asking for help as her little brothers are waiting for her to go home. Yet, Yogiri simply replies that's not a reason to steal and kill people. The last guy asks if he isn't talentless, but Yogiri points his finger at them and tells them to die. However, it doesn't work. They are still alive and try to run away. Tomochika asks if he is letting them go, but Yogiri replies he didn't, he simply delayed his order. The two bandits manage to hide themselves, but the death is activated. Yogiri tells Tomochika it's time to leave, but they're stopped by some guards who want to know about the situation. Yogiri lies and explains they got lost and found everyone dead on the floor. One of the guards reveals that's a lie because she saw everyone fall out of nowhere when they were about to attack the two. Tomochika gets angry because this clearly means the guards were watching but didn't help them. The guard explains they wanted to destroy the bandits' backer as well. Yogiri understands the guards wanted to let them get sold and then track the people who bought them. The guard confirms it and tells them that Yogiri cannot do anything to them because they're protected against gifts. However, one of the guards uses his appraisal skill and reveals that neither Yogiri nor Tomochika have gifts. The girl is shocked, but that clearly means they cannot do anything to the two because they have no powers. The guy apologizes because his captain is as rude as your everyday Karen, but Yogiri doesn't mind. He asks the dude if he knows a place where they could stay the night. They take them to a huge mansion, which shocks Tomochika as she thinks it's a castle. Yogiri asks if she's fine with sharing a room with him to save some cash, but she's shy about it. He then decides to ask for rooms next to each other. Upon getting inside her room, Tomochika gets happy because it's big but questions Yogiri's true intentions when he asked if she wanted to share a room. She then thinks about the current situation and wonders if he likes her. However, she quickly remembers that all he cares is about her juicy, fluffy plot. Suddenly, she looks forward and sees a spirit in the air. She notices how it resembles her older sister and asks how she got into this world. However, the spirit tells her they're different and introduces herself as Mokomoko, her ancestor and guardian spirit. Tomochika is confused about the last part, and the spirit reveals that she appeared to help her in this emergency. Tomochika asks why now and not earlier. However, the spirit reveals that she was afraid that Yogiri might erase her. Tomochika is surprised that his ability works in spirits. The spirit begs Tomochika to talk to him about her, this way he won't hurt her. She accepts and asks about the spirit coming here to help her. In short, the spirit reveals that it can protect her from anything but physical attacks. She also reveals the reason why Tomochika doesn't have a gift. It's because she protected her. Tomochika gets angry and asks her why, but the spirit reveals it was dangerous. The spirit then reveals that gifts have advantages, however, they also allow Shion to control her life. Tomochika, the other three, were also being protected by spirits, but her ancestor doesn't know about it. Still, the spirit is happy because she finally has a successor for her school of archery. However, Tomochika ignores her, mentioning that she wants to return to her world, but she can only rely on Yogiri for the moment. The spirit gets excited, mentioning that's the reason why teach her the true martial arts. The next morning, Yogiri notices that she seems tired. She reveals it's all due to the recent events and asks if they will catch up with the others. Yogiri explains that he met Celestina, one of the inn staff, and had her look for the others' location, prepare language translation, and some concealment items. Not only that, but Celestina created something that will enable him to charge up his console. Celestina hands them some tickets to leave the city and Yogiri asks her to keep all the items he has. The two later depart on a train and Tomochika's ancestor is still scared of Yogiri. Tomochika asks if he can see her ancestor, to which he reveals that he only saw her from the moment Tomochika talked about it. Tomochika then sits by his side and asks if they will be able to meet their colleagues. Yogiri replies that according to Celestina, their mates should be moving around the primeval forest to train. Suddenly, he turns to her and pushes her down. A huge explosion blows the ceiling away, confusing her. Meanwhile, in the previous city, the guards are trying to interrogate the dog, who is blinded by Yogiri. The guy won't talk and they explain that healing magic doesn't work. There's a sage woman named Lane finds it interesting and pulls out one of the dog's eyes. She casts her healing magic to reconstruct the whole eye, but the dog still cannot see. She finds it more interesting and decides to reveal herself as a vampire. She bites the guy to transform the guy to increase his abilities and heal him, but the guy is still blind. Suddenly the building starts to shake and a guy known as the hero appears inside. The hero attacks Lane with several slashes, but she only complains that she likes her dress. The guards are confused because she took not damage, but in reality she just healed instantly. The hero throws his sword at the floor and Lane asks why is he attacking her when he should be dealing with the demon lord. The hero calls her a tyrant and prepares an attack. He explodes the whole building and is happy that he finally managed to kill a sage for Ariel. However, Lane is still alive and asks if Ariel is his lover. The hero is shocked and cannot believe that Lane managed to avoid the attack. Lane, however, explains that she didn't move at all because she cannot die. The hero is confused because his attack should have deleted her, but she only thinks that would be great if that was possible. In the end, the hero begs to be killed, but she simply throws him off the building. Back on the train, a message orders the passengers to stay put as there's a sage fighting an aggressor. Yogiri thinks they're safe as nobody is after them, but Tomochika doesn't know what's going on. They look around and see a huge mecha robot which Yogiri realizes is the aggressor. Tomochika uses her amazing sight to tell him the sage is floating. The sage launches several attacks at the robot, but their battle is pretty, even destroying mountains during fights it's pretty common. Tomochika asks if Yogiri can get rid of those two, but he asks her why should he do it. She claims they're on their way, but Yogiri explains that's stupid because he could use that same reason to kill everyone who walks in front of him. She tries to explain that they could have died just now, but Yogiri says they aren't targeting them. He reveals that he has some rules to use his power, otherwise he would simply kill everyone who annoys him. She apologizes for being naive when suddenly there is a huge attack coming in their way. Luckily, the robot takes the attack. The sage complains the robot is moving and attacks with a huge ice spell. The passengers get frozen, but Yogiri manages to protect Tomochika. Tomochika calls the sage cruel, but he gets annoyed. Yogiri asks why did he attack them, but the sage tells him to kneel down and praise him like a dog. He starts insulting Yogiri, but Yogiri insults him back and thinks about killing him. The sage falls flat on the floor and Tomochika asks if he did it. He simply replies he had a good enough reason to do it. The robot approaches them but reveals that he has no intention to fight. The robot wants to negotiate with Yogiri, promising to give him anything he wants. Tomochika realizes the robot is afraid of Yogiri, but our boy asks if there's a way to return to their world. The robot mentions he knows a way to return to the world where he came from, not where they came. Yogiri asks if the robot can take them there, but the robot refuses because his entire being is not in this world. Plus, the robot refuses to bring someone as dangerous as Yogiri to his world. He then explains that this world is at one of the lowest levels and climbing up requires a huge amount of energy and the right coordinates. Yogiri then asks the robot to give him advice on how to find the energy and coordinates to return to his world. He then asks if Tomochika wants something, but her spirit interrupts. Later that day, the guards find out the sage that defeated by Yogiri. Shion also finds out about them while talking with Lane and finds it curious they managed to kill a sage. Lane is interested in Yogiri's instant death ability, but Shion reveals that the sage is supposed to have instant death resistance. Shion then leaves and Lane tells her subordinate to head to Hanabusa City and find out Yogiri and Tomochika. Meanwhile, the two rest for the night in the woods, where Tomochika's ancestor reveals that she turned her underwear into a katana. The story continues. We see they walk through the forest until they reach Hanabusa City. Tomochika happily mentions that it looks like Japan but notices that Yogiri has a poor physical condition. Yogiri, however, replies that's normal because he killed enemies on their way. She gets confused but when looks back notices monsters and bandits who try to attack them. She asks that since he's tired his power must have a limit, yet Yogiri replies that he can use it as much as he wants but he will feel tired after using it. They get inside the city and the spirit notices there are barriers instead of walls. Tomochika looks around and sees the huge hotel the previous lady told them about. They decide to stay there and get inside where they meet Tachibana, their classmate. He's happy to see Tomochika and she asks why he's here instead of being with the others. Tachibana replies he's split with them because they're inefficient with their leveling. Yet, there's a maid girl who isn't happy with Tomochika being friendly towards Tachibana. The guy tells her to calm down because they're classmates. The girl shuts up. But there's another one who praises Tachibana. Tomochika is confused and asks Yogiri if he knows what is this all about, but he doesn't. Tachibana then introduces them to the maid girls, mentioning they're his bodyguards. There are a total of 5 girls severing this piece of trash. The 5 girls introduce themselves but also use this chance to threaten Tomochika. She doesn't understand what is this all about. But Tachibana apologizes because he's a beta who isn't strict with girls. He orders the girls to shut up and Yogiri asks Tomochika if this guy also left them behind. He mentions that he doesn't know what kind of ability Tachibana has, but he seems quite confident. Yet, Tomochika reveals that this loser has always been like this. He was always popular with girls and a narcissist. Yogiri is surprised, mentioning that school is more interesting than he thought. Suddenly, this trash calls this fate and invites Tomochika to become his lover. He knows this was sudden to ask, but Tomochika is shocked. The guy goes on telling her to not worry about Yogiri. He doesn't usually accept guys, but he can give him some special treatment. Tomochika is shocked because this guy still keeps going. Even Yogiri mentions that he doesn't feel killing intent thanks to this nonsense. Tomochika asks why he is so confident and Tachibana replies he has the dominator class. In short, he can dominate everyone who's weaker than him. She's still shocked by his words and mentions that he hasn't leveled up that much when compared to the others who are training in the primeval forest. This trash thinks she's into him and decides to explain everything. It all started when they threw a party after completing their first mission. Furai's came to him and gave him some advice. Furai's class is a consultant. In short, he's a master plotter and scammer. Furai's mentioned how everyone was avoiding Tachibana because of his class and mentioned that if someone doesn't become a sage, everyone will become livestock, and that's why he tells Tachibana that he should buy a large number of the cheapest level 1 servants. In short, the servants will fight for him, and if they win the battle, the opponent will become his servant but also get the experience points. Yet, Tachibana mentions that his abilities don't have that information. Furai's reveals that his consulting class allows him to see the hidden details of others. Tachibana wants to know why Furai's is trying to help, but our master plotter just wants to make sure that everyone has a chance to become a sage and wishes him good luck. After that story, Tomochika thinks support types are too strong in this world. Yogiri understands that while they're speaking, Tachibana's number of servants and level is rising. The cocky guy confirms it and asks Tomochika again to become his lover. She rejects him, but he tells her to think about it and reply later. He leaves the place and she reveals that he's annoying. Still, Yogiri thinks it would be safer for her to be by Tachibana's side when compared to him. She asks if he's trying to make her angry, but he doesn't understand her reaction. Later, Yogiri is resting on his bed while Tomochika wonders how long they're supposed to stay in that place. The spirit says they should leave after Yogiri wakes up, but Tomochika replies it's been already 3 days. She asks the spirit to check on him, but the spirit refuses to because she doesn't know what he will do to her. Tomochika then mentions that she's tired of staying inside and wants to go outside for a while. Suddenly, she sees some smoke on the streets. This is because the guy whom Lane told to take care of Yogiri is coming into the city and destroying everything. The guy announces that his immortal army is recruiting and that if the citizens die, they will become zombie soldiers. The spirit tells Tomochika this isn't good as it smells like death. Tomochika gets shocked and asks how this world can be so weird because people easily die here. Meanwhile, the other guy's maid is walking in the corridor while invisible. The spirit then asks if Tomochika doesn't want to go outside, but she rejects it, mentioning it's way more comfortable inside. The spirit says they cannot stay here forever, especially when an enemy is targeting her right now, but they cannot see it. Tomochika is confused and asks what they can do against someone they can't see. She decides to call Yogiri's room to wake him up, but the spirit thinks she's relying on him too much. Meanwhile, the phone rings while Yogiri dreams about his childhood. He remembers waking up to his dog licking his face and Asaka telling him that breakfast was ready. He then wakes up from his dream and picks up the phone, promising to go to Tomochika's room. Upon stepping outside, he sees the corridor is empty. However, the maid is invisible and pulls out a dagger. Yogiri closes his eyes and focuses on sensing the killing intent, and he manages to see the girl and finds out that she plans to target Tomochika. He pulls out his mental death note and the girl falls onto the floor. He gets inside Tomochika's room and explains there was someone outside her room to kill her. Tomochika is confused about why she would be targeted, but Yogiri simply calls the reception to say there's someone collapsed in the hallway. Tomochika asks why he did that, but he replies they would suspect them if he didn't. Meanwhile, Tachibana receives an alert mentioning that his maid's signal has disappeared, but he must worry about the other monster inside this dungeon. The monster attacks him, but he uses the barrier to block it. He thinks this is boring and uses the barrier to attack, mutilating the monster's arm. One servant is quite happy, mentioning that he's way too strong for monsters on the 100th floor. The monster asks who Tachibana is, but this guy uses his menu to use a flare bomb skill. The monster is defeated and he then steps on him to make a contract. The monster calls him master and the girl casts heal to restore its body parts. Tachibana then asks how many floors there are in this dungeon and finds out it's 150. He then orders the monster to head to the bottom floor and collect more servants. The monster leaves and Tachibana asks where the maidservant is. The other girl replies she should be in the hotel. Tachibana then decides to use his skill to see her memories, but just watches her collapse. He thinks she was attacked from behind, but the other girl doesn't think she would let someone sneak on her. He then asks why the maid in the hallway was, to which the girl replies that there are two possibilities. First, she wanted to bring Tomochika and make him happy. Second, she wanted to eliminate Tomochika. He gets confused because that would be inconvenient to him. The girl explains that his servants' opinions don't always matches. He gets worried because that might make Tomochika run away from him and orders two other servants to hold her in place. Back at the hotel, Tomochika realizes that it was Tachibana's maid and Yogiri thinks that this is bad. He tells Tomochika to prepare her stuff to leave this place. She confirms it, but he's surprised that she's really calm in this situation. Tomochika replies that she's used to seeing dead people while by his side. The spirit adds up, mentioning that humans will die anyway, plus her family members shouldn't be upset over something so basic. Tomochika gets angry and tells the spirit to stop talking about philosophy. They start running away, but another Tachibana servant appears asking where they are going. Yogiri asks what she wants, but the girl casts a spell to restrain him inside an ice crystal. She happily reveals that her trash boss asked to bring Tomochika to him. Yet, Yogiri simply punches the ice and gets free. The girl and Tomochika are confused because it should be easy to break it, yet Yogiri replies that he tried to kill the ice, which worked. Tomochika is confused and asks what he means by killing the ice. The servant is in shock and starts casting more magic, yet Yogiri kills the magic and then her staff. The girl falls to her knees and he explains that he can kill anything he thinks about. Therefore she should be a good girl and answer some questions. She accepts and he asks if she can use magic without a staff. The girl reveals that due to her class, she can only use magic when holding staff. Yogiri knows this means that she must have some spare ones. The girl confirms and pulls another one from Happyland. Tomochika asks why she is hiding it there, but also tells Yogiri to stop looking. He's surprised because he didn't expect that she could use them in that way. He then talks about what she just said about taking Tomochika to Tachibana and asks about the others. She answers that everyone received the same order. Suddenly, another girl is on the ceiling and tries to attack Tomochika. She quickly uses her judo skills to put the girl down. Yogiri is surprised, but the spirit mentions that Tomochika's martial art talents are awakening. However, when they properly look at the girl, they notice it's a doll. More dolls surround them and the other girl pulls another one from her hair, mentioning that she thought she could do this on her own. Yogiri's eyes shine and the girl drops dead onto the floor. The girl who controls the dolls is sitting on the stairs and orders them to deal with it but to let Tomochika live. However, Yogiri kills every doll. The girl starts to panic and they manage to find her. She begs them to not kill her, making Tomochika feel like they're the real villains. Meanwhile, Tachibana feels again that his servant is dead and the little girl has lost her will to fight and told Yogiri and Tomochika everything. Upon hearing the conversation, he tells the other maids that Yogiri can kill anything just by thinking. They all find it hard to believe it, but Tachibana thinks they should observe them first and lead them to a place where they can ambush them. Tomochika and Yogiri start walking down the stairs until they see it filled with cockroaches. She screams in fear, and when Yogiri is about to say its name, she stops him because it will traumatize her. The spirit knows Tachibana is using the insects to watch over them. Tomochika asks if Yogiri can kill them, which he confirms, but the insects will reign over their heads. She refuses that idea, but he mentions they could enter her mouth and suffocate her. She imagines it and decides to get revenge on Tachibana. The spirit mentions that Tachibana could make the whole world their enemy. Tachibana watches the situation thinking that Yogiri cannot do anything. He thinks about using the cockroaches to make them scream and chase them. However, his maid says that he should be careful because they don't know about Yogiri's power. He refuses to give up and orders the cockroaches to kill Yogiri. They all activate the bloodlust, making Tamika feel scared. Yogiri says they should kill Tachibana because he thinks it won't take too much effort. He uses the roach's killing intent to track Tachibana's position and tells him to die. Tachibana collapses on the floor, making all his servants shocked. Yet, Tomochika is freaking out because he failed and the cockroaches are still alive. Yogiri explains his power never fails because if his enemies can reach him, he can also reach them. After all, the world won't let someone act without consequences. Tomochika notices the roaches are more active, and he explains that's because Tachibana's death has set them free. She panics, but he grabs her arm and tells her to run. Meanwhile, Tachibana's servants are still trying to heal him from the dead. The other one tells her they're free now and walks away. Yogiri and Tomochika then walk through an alley to leave the city, but they suddenly hear screams. Upon checking, they see the city filled with zombies. The story continues. We see zombies start wreaking havoc in the city and Tomochika questions what is happening. Yogiri, however, mentions the zombies are slow and it should be possible to escape if they're careful. Tomochika asks if they cannot help, and Yogiri replies it will be hard to save the city. Even the spirit tells them to get out before everything gets worse. Meanwhile, the city mayor complains about Masayuki, who released the zombies into the city, explaining that Lane the vampire sage gave him the city managing rights. Masayuki simply tells him to not worry because the sage candidate era is under Lien, plus the mayor shouldn't be worried because they fought the same battles. The mayor replies Masayuki already died and became an undead and therefore he should group his zombies and leave the city. The zombie dude, however, reveals this was Lane's order. He tells the mayor to hand him the key to the city. Since it's an order, the mayor gives him the key and asks what he will be doing. However, Masayuki replies it's nothing important. He then uses the speakers around the city to order his zombies to stop moving. The undead then introduces himself to every citizen and uses a huge screen to show Yogiri and Tomochika's pictures. He explains that he's searching for them and the remaining humans should bring them to the central plaza within 1 hour. If the citizens don't do it, he will make his zombies move again. At that same moment, Yogiri and Tomochika were trying to sneak outside the city. They hear everything the other guy has said, but also hear that he locked the whole city to prevent everyone from running. With this, every citizen understands they have two options: to capture Yogiri and Tomochika or to become a zombie. The mayor suddenly enters the room the other guy is speaking from, complaining about hurting the citizens. However, the guy replies that if he didn't threaten them, they would never look for the other two. Everyone around the city starts looking for the other two, which forces them to hide in alleys. Tomochika thinks humans are now way more dangerous than zombies, but Yogiri replies they must run to avoid being found. Tomochika then asks why they are being chased. Yogiri thinks about it and replies it must probably be because he killed the other sage. Suddenly, 3 guys manage to find them and promise to take the 2, even if it means killing them. Yogiri thinks this was quite fast and warns the guys that if they get close he will kill them. One of the guys ignores him and tries to attack, forcing Yogiri to mentally death note him. The others start to panic and Tomochika starts complaining about this being a disgusting way to carry out a promise. Yogiri replies these guys are trying to kill them, so they should also expect to be killed. He then notices the other 2 running away and thinks Masayuki is only instigating this because they think Yogiri cannot kill a normal person. He reveals that he's now annoyed and thinks about going to the plaza to negotiate with Masayuki. They head out to meet him but find the place to be quite grim, as if it was Halloween. Tomochika even thinks this is the most fantasy-like stuff she has seen in this world. Upon getting close, Yogiri asks who's Masayuki. The guy initially doesn't recognize them and asks if they came here because they gave up running. He calls them boring for trying to sacrifice themselves for the people, but Yogiri calls him stupid. Tomochika starts to panic after hearing those words and Masayuki asks what Yogiri wants because if he kills him the game is over. Yogiri replies he wants to get on a train and go to the royal capital. Therefore, it would be kind of Masayuki if he removes the barrier around the city. Masayuki is shocked to hear those words and gets angry. He starts complaining, mentioning that Yogiri is in a bad position to negotiate right now. Yogiri realizes that's true and thinks he must have something to offer. Therefore, he simply says that he will let Masayuki live, even though he should that would be a bad thing. Masayuki gets even angrier, calling Yogiri crazy and asking if he wants to die right now. He orders his Immortal Core army to attack Yogiri, explaining that Yogiri cannot kill something that is already dead, but as you expect, our boy orders them to die and they all collapse. Masayuki is shocked because he cannot understand what's going on, and the mayor uses this chance to say he's not involved in anything. Yet, Masayuki wants to know how the dead just died. Yogiri replies he also doesn't know about it, but since the undead were moving, it pretty much means they were alive. Tomochika then complains about how Yogiri ignored what just happened but just answered it. Masayuki still could not believe what had just happened, but Yogiri gave the biggest Chad answer: he's the one who decides what's dead. In short, if it moves it's alive, if they stop they're dead. Masayuki gets angry and calls out his master Lane, but Yogiri simply asks what he is going to do since his comrades are already dead. The guy gets down and refuses to accept Yogiri's instant death ability. He starts transforming into a mix of Batman with werewolf, but Yogiri tells him to die. Tomochika complains she wanted to see the transformation first. Yet, Yogiri doesn't understand why he should do it. She then asks what they're going to do now because they cannot negotiate with the dead undead. However, Yogiri says that's not a problem and approaches the mayor. The guy panics and begs to stay alive, promising that he just wants his city to stay safe. Yogiri simply replies they just did this to protect themselves. The mayor then explains this is all because Sage Lane ordered Masayuki to kill the two. Upon hearing that name, Tomochika questions if Shion isn't the real name. The mayor then explains that Shion is also a sage, but this city is under Lane's control. Tomochika is confused because they came to this world because of Shion and now another sage wants to kill them. The mayor explains he doesn't know much about it, but he doesn't usually interfere with sage candidates. The spirit then calls out Yogiri, but he replies that he already knows that there's some sort of spiritual manipulation heading to that area. Suddenly, Yogiri starts feeling killing intent all around the plaza. Every citizen gears near, making everyone confused. The mayor then checks Masayuki's body, explaining that if they're using spirit magic, then the city barriers should keep them safe. He tries to activate the key, but it doesn't work. He then realizes that Lane is the one controlling the barrier. Meanwhile, Lane is trying to direct a huge monster towards the city. Her new vampire servant, which is one of Tachibana's slaves that she transformed, complains this is dangerous. Lane, however, explains that Tachibana got killed from a distance because his hostility was traced. Lane asks how she rates Yogiri's threat level, and the servant replies it's above a sage or any mythical being. She wants Lane to stay away from Yogiri, but Lane refuses to. Lane realizes that despite her servant knowing that she's immortal, she's worried about her. That means that Yogiri must be some sort of god of death. Meanwhile, inside the city, Tomochika asks if Yogiri cannot kill the source controlling the citizens. He replies this is different than Tachibana's case. He starts killing everyone who tries to attack them and people fall one by one. He feels like this is just a test like they used to do to him when he was a kid. Yogiri then notices the mayor in a panic to see his citizens die in front of him. He tells him to get closer, but Lane reveals that her plan is to cause Yogiri's death indirectly. She then creates another clone of herself and orders her clone to fly up and create even more clones. Yogiri notices the killing intent gets stronger, but Tomochika then notices the dark aggressor. The huge aggressor destroys everything he passes through and they begin to panic. Yet, at the same time, Lane reveals that since her clones know nothing about Yogiri, they have no killing intent toward him. She then orders his clones to attack the city. When the aggressor either tries to attack or dies, Tomochika then asks Yogiri if he can kill the aggressor. He replies yes, which shocks her because she didn't expect it. The mayor begs Yogiri to save the city, but he has a bad feeling about doing it. Nevertheless, he orders the aggressor to die, and while it's taking effect, he notices the city being attacked from the air. He saves Tomochika from being hit, but she wonders if this attack came from the aggressor. Yogiri reveals he killed the aggressor. However, this attack blended with the darkness's killing intent to remain unnoticed. He realizes this attack has no target, but the goal is to destroy everyone in it. He thinks everything until now was just a test, but Tomochika tells him to stop enjoying his new pillow. They then get up and Yogiri explains he doesn't know what's happening. Upon looking at the sky, Tomochika explains she sees several women in a dress raining from the sky. The mayor realizes that Lane, and Tomochika asks if Yogiri can do anything to her. He explains that he cannot do anything because she isn't aiming at him, plus they're all moving so fast that he cannot find them. In short, this all planned to deal with his skill. Since all women look the same, Tomochika asks how many Lanes exist. The mayor then reveals their clones because Lane has super regeneration abilities. Upon hearing that, Yogiri reveals he can deal with it, but it would be easier if she aimed at him. The mayor then brings out a hologram of the city and explains there's a pattern to the attacks. It doesn't attack the same place twice, and the attacks aren't also made close to each other. The spirit even calls Lane dumb because she's trying to make it random, but she made it consistent instead. Tomochika thinks they can use this information to predict where will be the next attack. The mayor quickly realizes where it will be, and Yogiri says he will be heading there. The mayor then reveals he will help him with his teleportation ability. Yet, Tomochika also wants to come. Yogiri tells her to hide, but says she's the only one who can see everything. The spirit also wants to help, and they decide to teleport away. Yogiri and Tomochika hold hands, and she leads him to where the clone will hit. He orders the clone to die, and the spirit uses an ability to create a shield around them. After the impact, the shield is retrieved and Tomochika is relieved because she thought she would die. Yogiri then notices something on Tomochika's hand and asks what it is. In short, the spirit used its power to combine some of Tomochika's underwear with the power of the previous aggressor that can transform into a shelter. Yet, the spirit is worried because defeating the clones won't help in the endgame. Yogiri however replies it's all fine. The clones then fall and disappear, making Lane question how immortal vampires can die. Her servant tells her they shouldn't target Yogiri, but Lane replies she just needs to make new clones with different settings. Suddenly, there's a strange feeling in her body and she realizes her true body, which was hidden in another dimension, is dead. She then goes on a bungee jumping without rope, but thinks this is how she saved the girl. She suddenly disappears and Tomochika realizes there aren't any attacks coming. With this they return to the mayor to get everything ready and escape. Meanwhile, in a random house a young girl wakes up and notices her bed looks like a coffin. She thinks she's a vampire and sees a rock in her hand. The rock shows Lane's hologram explaining that her plan was successful and she died while the girl survived. She then tells the girl that she is a younger clone made from her who didn't get her memories to avoid being targeted by Yogiri. Back in the city, the mayor thanks them for their help and gets them a card telling them to be careful. Upon getting inside, Tomochika complains that Yogiri is playing games instead of driving. He explains that's because he always crashes his car into walls when he plays games. Therefore he cannot drive. With that, Tomochika is ready to drive and the spirit reveals that her family has the skills to drive anything. Tries to wake up Yogiri by driving through a canyon and convinces him to drive. Yet Yogiri is dreaming about the moment he met Asaka, his foster mother. That day, Asaka was taking a job interview to work for a research institute, but upon reading the contract, she noticed a clause that she couldn't complain if the job was the cause of her death. She tries to obviously reject it and leave, however, they force her to sign it. She thought this was the base of an evil organization, but Yukio the interviewer tried to dismiss it. While taking the lift, she wanted to know the details about her job. Yet, Yukio replied that she simply had to take care of a monster. She's shocked to hear it, but Yukio explains they do cursed experiments in their institute. Upon reaching the bottom floor, she notices how dark it is with something written on the doors. Yukio explains that's a scripture. She asks where he is taking her and he reveals it's to her workplace while taking another lift. He asks if she knows about Alpha Omega, since she doesn't. He explains that it means everything or eternity, and that's the name of the test subject she will be taking care of. Asaka asks if that subject is human, but Yukio cannot give her an answer because he has never seen it. All he knows is that Alpha Omega can kill anything he wants just by thinking. Asaka cannot believe they expect her to take care of a monster like that. Yet, Yukio replies that's possible because she has a teacher's license. She realizes that's the only reason she got this job, but Yukio tries to explain that if she doesn't do it, humanity could perish. He explains they think they can only avoid that outcome by providing him with an adequate education. She complains because there are other people more suitable for this job. Yukio reveals she's the perfect fit for the job. After finally reaching the final floor, she notices a vault door. Yukio explains he cannot get further from here and gives her some papers with instructions. He wishes her good luck and takes the lift up. She uses her card to open the vault and upon stepping inside notices how it's not what she expected. She follows the map and reaches a house, but she doesn't seem to find anybody inside. She then hears some noise from a room and opens the door. She then sees that Alpha Omega is just a little innocent kid. Despite the shock, she complains about everyone being scared of a little kid and picks him up. She goes outside and throws him onto the floor, telling him to be a normal kid and play outside. The kid is confused but points his finger at her. She gets scared after remembering that he can kill anything just by thinking. Suddenly she hears something dropping to the floor and sees some sort of shadow. The kid revealed the thing was hiding in her shadow just to get here. She asks about it and he calls it a demon, while also revealing they often come there to kill him. Asaka is confused and the kid tells her that he doesn't mind playing outside, but asks if he can do it tomorrow because it's almost evening. Asaka realizes she forgot about it after losing her head and helps him get up. She introduces herself and asks the kid for his name. He replies they call him Alpha Omega, but before he came there, he was called Lord Okakushi. He then tells her that he's hungry, making her realize that she must also prepare his meals. She checks the fridge and realizes that she cannot cook at all. While checking every kitchen compartment, she finds some cup noodles and gives him to eat. Upon tasting, the kid mentions he likes it, but Asaka is still thinking about his name. She asks about his parents, but the kid doesn't know what's a parent. She apologizes and upon looking at him, she thinks about a dog and names him Yogiri. The kid asks if Takatou Yogiri sounds good. Asaka doesn't understand why he's using her family name but realizes that he doesn't know what's a family. She decides to let him use that name and teaches him how to handshake and greet someone. Meanwhile, Tomochika wakes him up to tell him about the boulder in their path. She mentions how he was asleep for the whole time, but he explains that it's because he used too much power in the last city. Yogiri then asks the most important question: why are they even going to the capital? Tomochika is shocked because he could have asked that question before they left. Yogiri explains their goal to return to Japan, and to do that, they must talk to Shion, but he thinks there's a better way to talk to her without going to the capital. Tomochika replies their classmates are all going there. She then starts driving back hoping that she can find another route to take them to the capital, but they suddenly bump into something. Upon checking outside, they see a dragon who prepares to attack them, but Yogiri orders it to die. Tomochika feels relieved until she notices a lot more dragons flying their way. Yogiri realizes they're in their territory. The dragons prepare to breathe fire and Tomochika grabs his arm, asking him to do something. Since the dragons have killing intent, Yogiri orders them all to die. The dragons start raining down, making Tomochika even compare it to a dragon insecticide commercial. She sighs in relief until she notices they're being covered by the big shadow. Upon looking up, she sees a huge golden thunder dragon in front of them. She starts freaking out thinking she will be struck by lightning, but Yogiri reveals he doesn't sense any killing intent. The dragon looks at them and tells them they have passed. Tomochika is confused by those words, but the dragon turns around and flies away in panic. Yet Yogiri yells at it to wait and asks why the dragons attack them, if they can understand. The dragon ignores him, but Yogiri promises that he will do the same thing he did to the other dragons. Turns out the huge dragon is actually a little girl who's shaking in fear. She knew she should have flown away without talking. Tomochika is confused about her new appearance, and the spirit reveals it happens a lot in parallel worlds. Yogiri asks why the girl attacked them. The girl explains she was trying to see if they were qualified to meet the sword master. Yogiri and Tomochika are confused by those words. The girl asks if they haven't come to see the sword saint. They respond they couldn't give less of a cat because all they want is to get to the capital. The girl explains the sword saint is in this canyon and that if they meet them they could get a gift. In short, she's only here to test people who want to meet him. However, our duo still couldn't care more about it. The little girl goes on to say how great the sword dude is, mentioning he can rival the sages. With that, Yogiri thinks he must have some information on how to return to their original world, yet Tomochika thinks they shouldn't take a detour because they're already lost. The little girl uses this chance to propose a deal. She will guide them to the capital, but first they must meet the sword dude. They accept the deal and she introduces herself as Adela. After a quick drive, they reach a spot where several people are gathered waiting for the sword dude. Everyone starts complaining about them cheating for coming in a vehicle. Yogiri is confused about everyone's words, but Adela explains that today is the selection for the Knight of the Holy King. In short, if someone becomes a Knight of the Holy King, they can become the Sword Saint disciple. Therefore everyone here is aiming to become the next Sword Saint. Another guy looks at them and says they've been disqualified despite working so hard, yet another voice says the selection hasn't started, therefore nobody has been disqualified. Everyone then sees the Sword Saint. The old man then gives everyone their first trial, which is a battle royal to the death, until he tells them to stop. Tomochika cannot believe the old geezer, but Yogiri asks the old guy if he can leave. Adela is confused, but the old man creates a rule that if Yogiri leaves the place, everyone will be disqualified. Everyone starts killing each other while Yogiri and Tomochika watch. A random group suddenly targets them, and since Yogiri has no other option, he decides to kill them, yet a random dude comes forth promising to protect them. The random guy calls everyone a fool, mentioning they're all misunderstanding the sword dude's intention. He thinks this is a test to determine if they have the right personality to become a Knight of the Holy King. Tomochika thinks he's a decent person, but the spirit mentions he's skilled. The guy deals with multiple opponents at the same time, yet he doesn't have the intention to kill them. Some random guys start casting magic towards Yogiri, but he simply orders them to die. The random dude is confused about why they fell, but concludes it must have been the old guy punishing the lawless ones. Since everyone had given up on fighting them, he turned to the duo asking them to stay for a while longer while he protected them. Suddenly, the two hear a voice asking for help on the ground. They see a guy who was sliced in half trying to crawl and asking for a stone. Tomochika sees a rainbow-colored stone next to her and places it on his hand. The guy then crushes the stone and somehow regenerates his body. He thanks her for the help, but the sword guy tells them to stop and follow him because their numbers are lower now. He walks into the forest and Tomochika wonders what they should do. Adela begs them to stay and participate. Yogiri is confused because she just wanted them to meet the Sword Saint. She then explains that if her recommendation becomes the Knight of the Holy King, she will become their servant. Yogiri thinks this is becoming troublesome, but since they haven't gotten any info, he will follow along. As they move, the other guys introduce themselves as Rick and the crystal guy as Linnell. He explains he was forced to accompany his friend to this trip. Yogiri asks Rick about the Sword Saint and Knight of the Holy King. Rick explains there that a holy knight deals with the gods who have been sealed away, which they call demons. He reveals the devil appeared 1,000 years ago and was sealed by the Holy King of that same era. Yogiri isn't sure the devil is still a threat after being sealed for so long, but Rick explains some followers are trying to unseal him. Tomochika also uses this chance to ask Linnell about the stone he had. He calls it an apology stone that can heal him from serious injuries or even be used as gacha tokens. Tomochika is confused, but he explains that his luck is negative. He quickly reveals that he turned into a sacrifice of a mysterious organization before coming to this world. Suddenly a goddess appeared to him and gave him those stones. Tomochika uses this chance to ask the spirit if gods like to control people's destinies. The spirit replies that some people are guarded by spirits, but there are also some people whose fate gets decided by God. Rick asks what a gacha is and Linnell decides to show it off. He needs to use 3 stones per pole and throw them into the air. Suddenly a normal scrub brush appears and he proudly explains he can exchange them for a random trash item, yet Tomochika notices that he only has 3 stones left in his back. Linnell pathetically explains that he gets new stones every midnight, depending on how unlucky his day was. Suddenly they see the other participants vanishing, but Adela tells them to not worry because that's an invisible barrier. Upon getting inside they see a huge tower, but the spirit orders Tomochika to leave this place because she senses some evil miasma from the tower. Suddenly Linnell starts throwing up and the spirit explains he got hit by the miasma. The spirit explains Tomochika is only feeling fine because she's being protected. Meanwhile, Yogiri is looking around and notices something. Linnell uses this stone and gets resistance to the miasma. Yogiri then asks Adela if it's fine to get inside the tower, but she isn't there. Rick explains that only people taking the trial are allowed inside. They get inside the tower and take an elevator to go to the highest floor. There the old guy tells them to look down. They see a huge energy ball and the old man explains that's the end of the world. Upon looking down, Tomochika sees monsters frozen in time during a huge battle. She notices there's a man in black and a woman in white at the center. She tells Yogiri the woman's sword is piercing the two and Rick explains that's the Holy King and the devil. The old guy explains his job is to guard this place. Suddenly a girl named Frederica thinks this will all end if they beat the things inside the ball. Linnell calls her name, revealing that she's the friend who dragged him here. She tells the old man that his duty will end today and throws a huge fireball inside the energy ball. She's confident it's all over now, but the attack barely moves upon getting inside the energy ball. The old man explains that time flows slowly inside the barrier. Therefore, it will take some 100 years before it reaches the Dark Lord. The girl is shocked, but the old man points to another girl explaining she will give the details of their trial. She reveals their goal is to go from the roof to the first floor of the tower within 24 hours. A girl asks if they can jump down from the roof, but the other replies they must first accumulate 100 points inside the tower. The duo notices they haven't seen her before but notice that some other participants have been added. Tomochika ignores it and asks if Yogiri cannot kill the Dark God with his ability. However, she realizes that he has no reason to do it. She then looks at him but he seems nervous. He then reveals he tried to kill the source of the miasma and turns out he killed the Dark God. The story continues. They then decide to get inside the tower to reach the bottom floor and leave. The other two try to follow them, but Lionel's friend tells him to stop. She asks for his special stones to restore her magic power. He hands her a stone while explaining that it can only be used by him. Since she cannot use it, she throws the stone and complains about him following her despite being useless. Rick advises them to move on, and once inside, they see several participants collapsed. He mentions the tower should be filled with monsters and traps. However, it should be easy to go through them because they're in last place. He tells them to avoid the missing traps, but Lionel immediately steps in one. He gets stabbed by a javelin but quickly heals himself with a crystal. Tomochika advises him to always hold a crystal in his hand. He thinks that's a good idea and uses some piece of cloth to tie the crystal down. That gives him enough confidence to go in front of everyone. Despite Rick's warning to wait, Lionel decides to open a door and go inside the room. However, the door closes and all they can hear is Lionel screams and stabbing sounds. They force their way into the door, but find a girl dressed as a maid inside. Rick recognizes her as Teresa and asks what's going on. She tells him not to judge her because this is just another way to get points. Rick doesn't understand why Teresa is participating in the trial despite already being a knight, yet she reveals that her qualifications were revoked after killing too many people by mistake, and that's why she's taking the trial again. Rick tells everyone to run away, but Tomochika notices that's impossible because the room is filled with thin wires. Teresa notices Tomochika has good eyes and is disappointed because they didn't fall for the trap. Rick then decides to stall Teresa while Tomochika and Yogiri find a gap and leave. However, Teresa thinks the swordmaster will be unhappy if the cannon fodder manages to survive. She starts attacking with her threads, claiming that a knight of the Holy King must be the strongest person in the world. Tomochika watches Rick using his shield to block the attacks and thinks that despite his strength, Teresa much stronger. She's just playing around while Rick needs to try his best just to block the attacks. However, Yogiri decides to ruin the fun and orders Teresa to die. She falls flat onto the ground, shocking everyone. Yet Yogiri changes the topic and asks if the hand he just found belongs to Lionel. Despite the initial shock, Tomochika starts looking around and finds him on the floor about to die, and begging to have the crystal back. The group later continues and reaches floor 98. There they meet a girl who explains this is a safe lodging area for everyone to rest. Yogiri uses this chance to suggest that the group split up because they could face a trial where they must have to kill each other. Rick agrees, mentioning he never expected this trial to be so cruel. He asks if they will be safe, and Yogiri reveals that as long as he's with Tomochika, Lionel also wants to wait until midnight to replenish his crystals. With this decision, Rick decides to leave while Lionel asks for a room to rest. Tomochika and Yogiri are left alone and he asks if she wants to rest. However, there's a problem. They only have one room available. Our boy takes the room just to find a couple's bed in it. Tomochika reminds him about her spirit ancestor always being present, but the spirit tells her to have fun while she hides inside the wall. Tomochika's worries start to grow as she sees Yogiri bluntly taking off his clothes and changing into his pajamas. He then steps into the bed and lays down like a brick. Tomochika cannot even believe this guy simply went to sleep while in the same room as her. Meanwhile, Lionel is in his room waiting for his crystals. He's happy that he managed to survive this far despite dying 15 times. It's finally midnight and he receives his crystal. However, he notices that instead of 10, he's getting 100 as a special event with a guaranteed ultra-rare item in gacha. He starts playing the gacha thinking he will be getting a weapon or something, but instead he summons a girl. He doesn't understand why he just summoned the goddess who reincarnated him into this world. She thinks she will be joining him as his ally, but she reveals that she's only here to check on him. Despite his confusion, the goddess explains she updated his checkpoint and if he ever dies again, he will respawn in this room. Meanwhile, the swordmaster wants to know how the trial is going. The girl explains she's worried about the number of dead not matching with the number of souls. The old dude tells her to not worry because that should still be enough to maintain the second barrier. Meanwhile, there's a fight happening in a random place. The girl complains about the guy attacking her, but he just claims that he doesn't want to become a sage. The girl reveals that she must kill him if he rejects. She uses her eye to measure his power while confirming his identity as someone who got his powers from God. The guy confirms, but reveals that he can also know her name just by looking at her. He tries to attack her with magic tentacles, but the girl cancels it just by saying some words. He freaks out and tries another attack, but she nullifies it by copying it. He doesn't understand how she can also use his magic, but she claims she can do the same things as him. He tries to cast another magic on the ground, but nothing happens. She explains that God can give and take his powers away. Since he cannot use magic anymore, the guy decides to use his sword. Upon looking at it, the girl realizes she cannot destroy it because of its high fate score. The guy attacks her, but she dodges and slices his head off with her small knife. Suddenly, the knife starts talking, revealing that she received a new mission. Her job is to head to Hanabusa and kill Yogiri and Tomochika. She thinks that dealing with sage candidates is annoying and starts walking away. Suddenly she hears a voice telling her to wait. Turns out it's Fatso, who quickly explains the other guy picked him out from the forest and saved him from monsters. Since he now has nowhere to go, he wants to become her servant. Back in the tower, the spirit hurries one of the two to wake up. Tomochika is the one who opens her eyes first, just to notice Yogiri enjoying his wildest dreams. She quickly gets up and the spirit starts begging for help. Tomochika notices the spirit has half of its body inside the wall and asks what's going on. The spirit explains that she noticed Yogiri clinging onto Tomochika while asleep and tried to give them some privacy. However, she ended up like this after becoming curious and trying to peek. Tomochika starts complaining, but the spirit reveals that the tower is drawing the souls of the dead into a single place. Therefore the walls and floors are trying to absorb her. Yogiri finally wakes up and the spirit asks if he can help her. Upon hearing it, Yogiri tries to kill the absorption function of the tower. The spirit is finally being absorbed into the wall and Tomochika says goodbye. Yogiri then touches the wall to narrow down the target and activates his skill. The spirit manages to get out of the wall and wonders why they are trying to collect the souls of the dead. Yogiri thinks this trial has some hidden objective. He tells Tomochika to be prepared because he will kill anyone who acts hostile without even asking anything. She's confused because that's what he usually does. Yogiri explains he's trying to avoid killing as much as possible. However, the other participants will try to kill them, therefore he cannot hold back anymore. Tomochika thinks that's too late to say because she's already prepared. She then surprises him by stating that he's been using his power to save her. Therefore using his power is the same as her killing someone. She doesn't think it's good to complain when all he does is protect her. She still tells him to be moderate, making Yogiri blush. He turns around mentioning he's hungry and they call for the room service. Meanwhile, the other girl is at the canyon and meets the golden dragon. Fatso tells her to run away because she cannot use her negative ability skill to win against the dragon. Yet she thinks that's easy because there's no way a huge dragon could actually fly. Suddenly the dragon falls flat, and she reveals that her ability is to simply change events as long as she believes them. However, she cannot affect anything with a high fate value. The dragon manages to get up and bites Fatso's arm, but the girl slices the dragon's head off. Suddenly an aggressor appears and starts absorbing the dragon's information. The aggressor suddenly escapes and she notices a tower from a distance. She decides to check the tower to find Yogiri, but the Fatso refuses to, explaining that he will be killed. Meanwhile, Yogiri and Tomochika are making good progress inside the tower, but he doesn't feel it's fair to kill all traps and riddles. Suddenly a random dude appears and tells him to stop cheating. He explains that he's the one who built this tower and that he can appear anywhere he wants. Tomochika complains that's also cheating, but the guy mentions he had a hard time thinking about traps just for someone to appear and destroy everything. Yogiri explains they just want to leave the tower, but he replies they cannot leave. He also reveals this tower exists to maintain the barrier that seals the Dark God. Therefore Yogiri cannot destroy it. Yogiri tries to make a deal. If he lets them leave, nothing will happen. However, the guy doesn't believe him because he could be one of the Dark God's pawns. The guy finally introduces himself as a Glacia of the High Wizard. He tries to give Yogiri some choices, but our boy tells him to die. Tomochika gets shocked and asks if this guy isn't someone important. Yogiri replies the guy was about to kill them and that they should move on. Suddenly, the Swordmaster notices several alerts in the tower system, revealing the soul path was broken. Not only that, but the traps and riddles are being destroyed without activating. Meanwhile, Rick manages to reach 100 points after defeating a random dude and notices a huge fire ahead. Upon getting close, he notices it's Linnell and his friend. She explains that she's trying to help Linnell, who currently has 0 points. She's literally creating a fire barrier and forcing him to fight other participants. Luckily, he manages to kill the dude and Rick notices that he's getting strong. Meanwhile, our duo manages to reach some sort of arena where they see 2 people fighting. They then notice a guy sitting on a throne with 2 other girls standing next to him. He tells the rabbit girl that his opponent's attacks are trash and she thinks he's trying to encourage her. Tomochika continues to watch the fight and the spirit asks what they will do. Yogiri thinks that's simple, this fight has nothing to do with them and therefore they will just advance quickly. Yet Tomochika notices the door is just behind the guy. The guy, however, tells the opponent to get serious. She decides to follow his advice and reveals herself to be half demon. The girl promises to finish this quickly before the sword master finds her identity. She combines magic with her sword and attacks the rabbit girl, yet the rabbit dropped her weapon and started to punch the other girl. Turns out the rabbit girl is focused on close combat instead of swords. Tomochika thinks this is never going to end and Yogiri decides to ask the guy to let me pass through. The guy on the throne asks who he is, but Yogiri simply replies they won't be getting in his way, yet the guy refuses to let them pass because his disciples don't have enough points yet. Yogiri still doesn't think they should be fighting because he and Tomochika only have 6 points combined. The guy freaks out mentioning that's a reason why they should fight. Yogiri dismisses it because he doesn't want to collect points, he just wants to leave. Yet the guy claims he's enjoying this trial and won't let anyone abandon it. Yogiri then confirms with the other girl and she replies that he can do whatever he wants. The guy on the throne thinks this is a chance to watch a 3-on-3 fight. If Yogiri wins he will let them pass. Tomochika starts to freak out, mentioning how awful Yogiri's negotiating abilities are. He tries to explain people just don't listen to him. The half-demon is worried about the other girl's strength because the rabbit is also strong, yet the guy reveals the rabbit is actually his weakest apprentice. He introduces his girls and then reveals that he wants to keep the half-demon and Tomochika for himself. He orders his girls to kill Yogiri and let the rest live, yet they all fall to the floor after Yogiri orders them to die. Since they won, Yogiri and Tomochika start walking away but the guy refuses to give up. He's about to make a move but Yogiri thinks about his death. Tomochika notices it but doesn't say anything. As they prepare to live, the half-demon girl asks if Yogiri is the one who killed everyone. He confirms it and she begs him for his help. Yogiri is unsure of what to do, but Tomochika tells him to at least hear the request. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.